Hello and welcome to the National Leadership Briefing. My name is Doug Sharp, and I will be your host for today. Well, it is Friday, April the 7th. It is Good Friday. And if you are just joining us today, you might be wondering why it is that we are doing a briefing on such an important day for us as Christians in this world. Well, many years ago, I made the commitment to you that I would serve you on the first Friday of every month, that I would be here at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern time, that for 1 hour, you and I would focus on the things that we believe in together, that we would rally around 4 very important Christian principles, that we'd work together to advance them into society, culture, politics, and government. And I am going to honor that. Now, I'm also going to say that everything that we're doing here today is not the most important thing. Of course, the most important thing is that you come to know in your heart what the spilled blood of Jesus did for you. On this Good Friday, this is the day that we recognize that moment in time where Jesus went to the cross. And I want you to know that if in my prayers and in my heart, that I would rather you forgot absolutely every word I said ever if it was up against that or coming to know or be in relationship with Jesus. So this is what my prayer is for you today, is that we keep the main thing, but at the same time, I am here today because I wanted to honor the commitment I made to you to be here on the first Friday of every month, whether it is on Good Friday or not, and that you and I would work together to advance the things that we believe in. So this is what we're going to do today on the National Leadership Briefing. It's going to be a very important briefing for us today. I'm very excited to be here because there's some critically important things that we need to address on the immediate road ahead. There are things that are not being discussed out there right now that are going to significantly affect your world. And I am praying that you receive this with an open heart and with a critically thinking mind, and that you action these items. You put these items into the list of things that you need to do, not just participate in. I don't want you to just to passively sit and listen today. I hope you engage with us. You take the post notes that you're going to receive after the briefing today, and you actually put them to use. So please, let's get started here today. I'm going to review the agenda right after this quick break, and you and I will begin the work ahead. Very critical also that if you're watching this on one of the social media platforms, as this is recorded and shared later, that you like and share this video and engage with the video in the comments section. We're trying constantly to beat the algorithms whenever we post things like this on social media. So the way you do that is by liking, sharing, and subscribing to our YouTube channel and commenting in the comments below. And that makes sure that when you share it with other people, that they have an opportunity to see that higher up in their list of things that they see in front of them in their social media platform. So let's do that as well today, but let's first take a quick break, come right back. Let's review the agenda. We've got lots to cover today, and I'm pretty excited about the opportunity I have to spend with you today. We'll talk in a moment. Bye for now. Okay, we're back. Let's get started. Let's review the agenda for today. We've got an awful lot to cover and only 1 hour to cover it, so let's waste no time. First of all, I'm just going to remind you that we have the 4 pillars. These are the principles that we rally around here on the National Leadership Briefing. When you and I get together, these are the things that we rally around and work to advance into society, culture, politics, and government. We use our combined voice to speak to these issues, either in our local communities or on a national level. But we are here today to focus on these things, screening out all of the noise, remember, and just keeping the main thing. So what is it we're going to be doing today to work to advance these principles into society, culture, politics, and government? Well, today we've got a big agenda here. What we're going to do is we're going to encourage you, again, to continue to think strategically and live tactically. We're going to encourage you to remember that we established a plan, that we're working a plan within different areas. One is the political realm. We've established a plan. We've been working a plan for now a couple of years with regard to advancing candidates into the political system. We want to identify, raise up, train, and deploy candidates into the political realm here in Canada at all levels of government. So we're going to talk about an experience that we had with a candidate. Actually, I might even touch on a couple of situations, because we've got a couple of really good examples to review of different situations that have tended to kind of take us off of mission. And of course, staying on mission is critically important for us. So again, if we want to think strategically and live tactically, be disciplined, stay on mission, when things happen or things come at us that might tend to knock us off mission, we try to refocus ourselves. We've got a great learning opportunity there to focus on today and use as an example. The second thing is we've got also the policy convention of a major political party. That is part of an overall plan, a strategy that we are working, and there's been some glitches there as well. So we're going to use these examples to learn and grow our understanding of the situation, the circumstances that we're living in today. The next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to be taking a look into the financial realm. Of course, if you take a look at the fourth pillar here on the list, we believe that it is important that civil government works to relieve that burden of debt that's been placed on the backs of our children and future generations. And if we see threats to the financial well-being of our children's future, we want to be bringing it forward here on the National Leadership Briefing. And today I see a great threat that is not being addressed in mainstream media. If you're sitting in front of the TV at night and you're waiting for CTV or CBC or Global News here in Canada to cover this story, you are going to be waiting an awful long time. Ultimately, you will be waiting until it is in fact too late to react and respond in an appropriate way. So we're going to start talking about that today on the National Leadership Briefing. I'm not going to be, even though we're talking about finances, I want to stress one thing. I am not your financial advisor. I will be giving you zero financial advice today. I am not suggesting that you respond in any specific way, but I want you to start raising your level of awareness when it comes to these things that are going to seriously impact the future of your children and the financial well-being of your family in the short term. The next thing I want to do is I want to make sure that we have time to talk about an upcoming event that is happening. As you know, we are committed here on the National Leadership Briefing to encouraging local churches to engage locally, to engage in relationship building with not only marketplace leaders, but also local government leaders, municipal government leaders. So we have an event that we've been working with another organization, a group of organizations actually, that's coming up, and I'm going to be bringing on someone who's going to be sharing a little bit about what they're going to be talking about in this upcoming event. So stay tuned for that right up until the very end. And then at the end, I want to actually open it up. I've got a bit of a book review that we're going to do at the end just to close things out. So thanks so much for your attention to the agenda today. We're going to come right back here and we're going to get right into learning about what it is that we can do when we see things that try to knock us off mission. So we're going to start talking about some examples. So come right back after this and we'll get started. Bye for now. These are the things that we believe in. First, that parents have the right to raise their children the way they want. Second, that those we elect to serve us in civil government must respect and defend our right of belief and freedom of religion. Number three, that the laws and policies of civil government must provide for the safety and security of the citizens, especially the vulnerable among us. And number four, that it is inappropriate to heap debt upon the backs of our children and future generations. They came from you. They're your pillars. They're the things that you believe. Okay, let's get started now. Hey, remember, we're about to talk about politics here, and I have always said one thing: politics is not the answer, but there is definitely a responsibility for us as citizens to engage in the political processes of our nation, because if we abandon this to others, What we are in fact saying is that we are leaving the decisions about the care of our neighbor in the hands of other people. Because what we're doing, in fact, when we abandon the political processes of our nation, is we are saying we don't care who leads our country and makes the decisions about the care of our neighbor. And we know that civil governments have the power to make either decisions that are going to positively or negatively impact the lives of our neighbor. And you and I do not have the luxury of not caring about the plight of our neighbor. We are called to love our neighbor and care about the decisions that civil government makes. And so that is why we engage. We engage because we want to not only advance the principles that are identified here in the 4 pillars, but because we believe that those decisions are ones that we need to be involved in making, because we have things that we can bring to the table that will benefit and prosper the lives of our neighbor and our nation, in fact. So that is why we engage. So politics is not the answer, and I know that. However, it is a very important part that we must engage in as citizens. Now, let's take a look at the political realm here in Canada. We're going to take a look at the federal landscape, the federal political landscape here in our nation. If you've been on the briefing before, you know that I have said that the reality that we live in here in Canada is that there is really only one party at the federal level where we have the freedom to have our ideas compete. Now, I'm not saying that it's perfect. I'm not saying that this one political party is completely wide open and that we can run the field anytime we want as people of faith. As a matter of fact, we're running into gatekeepers constantly within that political party that are constantly trying to limit our ability to have influence, and they're constantly trying to change the rules and limiting our ability to engage. However, if you hold that up against all of the other opportunities that there are, all of the other circumstances within other political parties, and I mean all the other political parties, then you will find that there is really only one place where we can compete. So we are fighting, first of all, to maintain a place on the federal political landscape of our nation. We are fighting to maintain a place where our ideas can compete. It is the last piece of ground that there is at the federal level. Now, of course, I'm talking about the Conservative Party of Canada. Now, for those of you that are engaged in other political parties, let's take a look at a couple of them, because I need to address this with you and make sure that we're clear. We're dealing in reality here. We are dealing in a very real way with what's happening right now here in Canada. If you are a supporter of the People's Party of Canada and you feel that you're called to be there and to work to advance the principles right here beside me within that political party, go for it. I absolutely would never stand in your way if you feel like you're called to be there. However, understand one thing, that if we're going to think strategically and live tactically, if we're going to be working a plan to advance principles at the federal level, you're in a political party that during the last election, and let's take a look at some hard numbers. They're maybe hard to look at, but you're working in a political party that is a very long way away from forming government or even posing any kind of a threat to forming government in the future. And I'll give you some hard statistics. Let's take a look at the last election. The last federal election, the People's Party of Canada had an absolutely fantastic turnout. It was celebrated all across the nation within that party. They said this is the best thing that could have ever happened, because what they did was they won 5% of the popular vote. Now, that's a big thing to go from 0 to all of a sudden getting 5% of the overall votes cast. That's a big victory. That is true. However, let's put it in perspective. There are 338 electoral districts in our nation. Of those 338 electoral districts in our nation, the People's Party of Canada candidates won 0 of them. So now we all knew that, because it's pretty well known that they don't have a seat in the House of Commons. So they won 0 out of 338 ridings in our nation. Now, you might say, well, Doug, that's just because we're building. Okay, that's great. But again, let's see how far away from achieving the goal of actually forming government, how far away we are from that in the People's Party of Canada. Of the 338 ridings of which they won 0 seats and have 0 representation in the House of Commons, they came second to the person who won in that electoral district in 7 ridings, in 7 electoral districts. So 7 districts out of 338, they came in second to the person who won. Well, that's pretty far. That's a pretty far distance away from forming government, that you aren't even second in the vast majority of the ridings that you competed in. But it gets a little bit harder to look at when you take a look at the next stat, which is if you take a look at the average that the People's Party of Canada candidates lost by in those 7 electoral districts, they lost by an average of 24,000 votes in each of those 7 districts. So let me just say this again. They won 5% of the popular vote, yet they won 0 seats total, and they came second in only 7 ridings, and they lost by an average of 24,000 votes in each of the 7 electoral districts. So they are a million miles away from forming government. So when you and I sit down on the National Leadership Briefing, I'm not being harsh. I'm not attacking the People's Party of Canada. I'm not saying that you're doing something wrong if you feel as though you're called to serve in that party and perform and provide that other perspective in your local riding. But please understand that you are working up against a backdrop of reality that says you will never form government. Right? So what we're doing is we're living tactically, we're working strategically, and we're working to advance and preserve the ground within the Conservative Party of Canada as a priority. That's all we're doing here. So when we talk about advancing candidates into the Conservative Party of Canada, we don't want anybody to poo-poo the idea of us actually continuing to work in the Conservative Party of Canada just because negative things happen. So again, now you may think, Doug, you're really over-explaining this, but it is the foundation of what I am about to tell you about these learning opportunities that we have while we're working our plan within the Conservative Party of Canada to remain effective as we're continuing to work this plan. First of all, the first example is we have a candidate in riding a federal electoral district. It was actually a nomination candidate. It's when the parties first come together in a local riding, they actually have to elect a candidate within the party. So the Conservative Party of Canada will have a contest within the Conservative Party of Canada in a local riding, a local electoral district, and they will elect out of several Conservative Party of Canada members the person they believe is going to best represent them at election time. So they want to elect the Conservative candidate in the riding. Well, there was a race in a electoral district called Oxford, and there was one particular candidate who, I tell you, you know what? I just, not only do I believe that one day this particular individual is going to be a fantastic elected representative and do a fantastic job, but this person's really quite nicely fit what we consider to be a 4-pillar candidate. I believe that every single one of the principles that are represented in these 4 pillars would be a core belief of the person that we believed was going to get elected to become the candidate in that riding of Oxford. Now, I'm intentionally not mentioning names because I don't want to personalize this. This is not about personalities. This is not about individuals. You get all emotional when you start talking about the actual individual person. And I am only, again, speaking about a strategic plan and living it out tactically. That's really what we're doing. I'm making it all cold and hard for you. So this one candidate, somebody we really liked and we really wanted to win, at the very last minute was taken out by the actual party for what most people would consider to be not a real solid reason. Like they actually, the party stepped in, intervened. It looked like our candidate was going to win that electoral district. They were going to become the Conservative candidate in the riding of Oxford, and they were going to win that riding. But at the last minute, the party came in, and I'll spare you the details, but it just really looked unfair. It really looked unfair that the party would come in, swoop in, disallow the candidate, and all of a sudden that person that was going to win isn't even in the race anymore at the last minute. So now the reason why we're looking at this particular set of circumstances is because if we're going to be thinking strategically and living tactically, we now have a curveball that's been thrown at us. We've run into gatekeepers. That's what these are. They're trying to withhold, they're kind of trying to keep us out of the system. But remember, our plan is to preserve the terrain that we're on. Our plan is to maintain and hold the ground that we believe is the last piece of real estate on the political landscape of our nation, where our ideas can compete, where we have a chance to form government. That's why we're there. So all of a sudden we get this curveball thrown at us. Well, the immediate reaction by thousands of people across the nation who are in our community was, I can't believe that's happening. They get all offended, they get all upset, they get emotional, they take offense, they get angry, and they forget the plan. They forget that we're working a plan, and they tear up their membership cards and they say, that's it, I'm out of here. And then they run across the street to the People's Party of Canada or some other place that has even a lower chance of ever forming government. This is a real life experience that we have just recently gone through. But I've got to explain this to you because that is not working the plan, and it's actually working against us in the long term. And let me explain why. What we know as people who work in this realm all the time is that it was a group called the National Council, the National Governing Board of the party, that actually voted that this candidate would be disallowed. This is like these people are elected from each of the provinces and territories of the nation within the Conservative Party of Canada. They're elected to serve on a governing board that makes the decisions as to which candidates can run. Now, if we are trying to get candidates into the process, if we're trying to get candidates elected to the House of Commons to make decisions that would advance these principles into law and policy of government, and everybody's tearing up their membership cards, then what we're in fact saying is that we're out, we're abandoning the playing field, and we're leaving it to others to decide what candidates are going to be elected in the future within that party. Let me again give you a little bit more detail. The National Governing Board of the party is going to be elected or re-elected at the upcoming policy convention in September within the Conservative Party of Canada. So again, let's stay with me. This is important that we know that understand this. You've got electoral districts all across the nation that are currently electing delegations of people to go to a policy convention in Quebec City in September, where they are going to vote on the policy of the party, and they're going to vote on electing the national governing board of the party that's going to decide on all the future candidates of the party and who they are. But if we're all out there ripping up our memberships and saying, I'm out of here and I'm abandoning this ship and I'm leaving it and I'm going to leave all the decisions to someone else to make, then somebody else is going to be electing the new governing board of the party in September that's going to decide who's going to be our future candidates. You see how we're actually shooting ourselves in the foot by reacting emotionally. So what I suggested was that if you've run into a situation where there is a gatekeeper, somebody who takes away your right to participate equally in the political processes of a political party, then because they're rule books, these are all rule books, and they skew the rules and they try to mess with you and they try to get advantage over you. Just understand that that is a part of the process. That is a part of the reality of politics in Canada. And our mission, our plan doesn't change. We are simply, whatever the rules are, whatever rules that you put in front of us, we have made a commitment that we will work within those rules and we will continue to compete. Because again, we're not in it to win it. We're in it because our ideas produce positive results in the lives of Canadians. And we're here in there defending our right to participate, but also defending our ideas so that it betters and improves and prospers the lives of our neighbor and our nation. That's why we're there. So my encouragement is, when it comes to Oxford and all other times you run into gatekeepers out there, remember the mission, remember the plan. Don't respond and react emotionally, and don't kill the messenger just because I'm the guy that's bringing this news to you here. I'm only telling you because I come from a place of walking this walk for many years, and I've seen it happen all too often, where everything that we work to gain, all the ground that we secure, we tend to forfeit when we run into gatekeepers, and they kind of count on us. I mean, I know the people, by the way, on the other side of this conversation that oppose your views and values. I know them by name, and I'll tell you, they kind of celebrate it when they go, hey, did you see how we got those guys to stand up, tear up their membership cards, and storm out of the room? Boy, that was sure a good strategy. We worked there, eh? Because that's what they want. They want you and I to leave the room. They want you and I to rip up our cards and to walk out of the room. Now, the Conservative Party of Canada is not the answer to our problems, just like politics is not the answer to our problems. But it is the last piece of political real estate in our nation where we can compete. And if that door closes and we have no other chance of participating in the decisions of civil government at the federal level, then we have a problem that is far more significant than the one we have in Oxford right now. Okay, so I'm going to leave it at that because that is a perfect learning opportunity for us when it comes to how we respond and react when we hit roadblocks. Okay, we're gonna leave it there for now. We're gonna come back right after this break, and we're gonna talk about the current circumstances that we are seeing develop south of the border. It's kind of complicated, but I'm really hoping that I have the skills and that God gifts me with the ability to communicate this concern to you in an effective way, because it is such a significant challenge and that I see forming here. And my job, what I feel like I'm supposed to be doing here is helping you to prepare to meet the challenge that is coming right now in the financial markets, because it is going to affect you. It is going to impact the lives of our children and future generations, most certainly. We'll come back right after this. Bye for now.
It's time to wake up from our slumber
and stand together, united as one. One family, one body, one church.
We will not walk past the vulnerable.
Say nothing, do nothing, and turn a blind eye.
We are citizens of a great nation.
We are good Samaritans to our neighbors. You are not alone.
We are the largest unified voice in Canada. So we stand united. This is our rally cry. We are Christ to our nation. This is our battle cry. He shall have dominion from sea to sea and from the river unto the ends of the earth. Righteousness will reign. Justice will prevail. We are united.
Okay, we're back, and I know that we are about to dig a pretty deep hole here. We are definitely going to be digging on this one here. We don't like to ride the surface here on the National Leadership Briefing. We always like to dig in, but this is going to go deep, and I just want you to stay with me here, and I encourage you to make this a point of research for you, whatever it is that you pull out of what I'm about to share with you. I hope that you follow it up with some research. I'm going to try and give you some resources here at the end as well, things that you can look to, but I definitely want this to be something you begin to take a serious look at moving forward, because I do believe it is a main thing for sure on the road ahead. Well, first of all, we're going to be taking a look at some of the things that are going on in the United States financial markets right now. We're going to take a look at currencies and debt, and you might say to yourself, well, why as a Canadian would I care what is happening in the United States? Well, our economies are tied so tightly together, and we are the number one trade partner of the United States. We have no other more financially tied. We're tied to no other country as tightly as we are tied to the United States. So what happens to our friend to the south can significantly impact our lives and our future financial well-being. So we are definitely interested in what's happening south of the border. Looking back, I'm encouraging you if you weren't already aware of it, or maybe if you're too young to know, we had gone through a significant financial crisis in the United States here back in 2008. The global financial markets were rocked by a major crash of the stock market, and there was a real estate market crashed, and it was really what not a lot of people know some of the details about what went on behind the scenes. So I want to share some of those details with you now, because it's a good example of how something significant can happen, and how close we can come to really a serious, irreparable problem in our financial markets, and you don't even necessarily even see it on the evening news. So let's look back at 2008. Not a lot of people know that it was September 18th around 11 o'clock in the morning. The chairman of the Financial Reserve and the Federal Reserve, pardon me, and the Secretary of the Treasury went to the White House to meet with President Bush. And when they got there, they told the president that because of the bankruptcy of a brokerage firm called Lehman Brothers, and the way it had been handled in the days prior to that, on September the 15th, they hadn't taken into proper account at the time that when Lehman failed, that the entire world and the commercial paper market, and again, these might not be terms that are familiar to you, but it's basically the working capital of the world, of all of the world's largest corporations, had basically become frozen as a result of the failing of Lehman Brothers. That's how large this institution was. Now, at the time of the meeting, and in the 24 hours prior to that meeting with President Bush, these officials had already injected, to try to resolve the issue, about $500 billion of capital into the world's financial system to improve the liquidity of the market. Because if the world's financial system freezes up, bad things happen. And so what the records of the testimonies of Congress now show is that what really happened was that when they ran the numbers and they stood in front of the president, what they needed immediately when they got into that meeting with President Bush was they immediately needed $1 trillion. Now, that was it for people like you and I that were around back there and kind of aware of hearing numbers bantied about in political circles. That was really the first time I'd ever heard the word trillion attached to something as a price tag. Usually you talk about billions of dollars, and that's a significant amount of money, but they were talking about $1 trillion being required. And what they were trying to stave off, what they were trying to avoid, was that they had presented to President Bush that it was quite possible that within 3 days of their meeting on that day, where they were asking for the $1 trillion, that the world financial markets would freeze up, and it would in fact collapse, that there would be a collapsing of the markets. Now, again, I'm not presenting myself as an expert on this. I'm just telling you what's been come out of it, what they've discovered about this period of time since then. And in addition to that, the advisors to the president were saying that they couldn't guarantee that the national and international social and political structures of the world wouldn't descend into chaos as well. And that would happen within what they figured would be about the next 30 days. So a clock started ticking in the minds of the president and of the officials in the United States, that they had about 30 days to deal with this issue. Actually, they needed it immediately, but within 30 days, the entire economy of the United States and life on the street level would change significantly. So what happened was, President Bush actually sent the officials to Congress, and they to seek the money. They needed the funding to actually avoid this chaos to break out in the United States in 2008. And that's where you might remember hearing the term called the TARP fund. It's a toxic asset, they called it a troubled asset relief program, but it dealt with what they considered to be toxic assets at the time. So it was like bailing out. They started pouring money into the system to bail out these bad assets. So this is how close it came back in 2008. But let's take a look at the backdrop of where the United States was in 2008. And then I'm going to bring you forward here to now as to what we're seeing now in the United States. And because there's a real interesting contrast between then and now and where we might end up in a very short period of time. So up against the backdrop of that happening back in 2008, here are some of the numbers that they were dealing with in the United States. Medicare and Social Security and Medicaid, these are responsibilities of government, commitments of government, together represented a liability of between 60 and 100 trillion dollars. Now, so that means the commitment that they make with government programs to provide Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security, those commitments added up to, again, 60 to 100 trillion dollars. Now, again, I'm talking about these massive numbers that are really hard to get your head around, but that's a significant amount of money. If you took the individual state governments and you of all of the United States, and you put them all together, like all of their debt in one pile, it added up to about $3 trillion. So that gives you an idea about the liabilities that are on the books for taking care of the citizens of the United States, totaling between 60 and 100 trillion dollars. Municipal governments were all about, collectively, they figured at that time, about $2 trillion underwater. So they were in debt up to about $2 trillion. The municipal employee pension funds and corporate pension funds were a combined $3 trillion under debt. So you can see how this is all kind of piling up. There's a lot of debt being carried at all levels of government. The trade deficit in 2011, that's all the goods that the US buys from China and all the foreign oil that they buy, was about $7 trillion and was actually a core part of their problem at the time. That trade deficit was a big problem. So the liability of the US balance sheet at that time was estimated to be about $200 trillion. Now, the total assets in the United States, that's all the stocks, all companies, basically all the cash, all the gold, all the real estate. If you added up all of the value, that only added up to about $60 trillion. So if you're looking at a business, and you've got, like, on one side you've got liabilities of 200 trillion and you've got assets of 60 trillion, you can see that there's a bit of an imbalance there. Now again, and this is why it's so important. We're tied very, very closely to the United States. And so when their balance sheet looks like that, and then all of a sudden the economic engine of their country is at risk of grinding to a halt with a balance sheet that looks like that, that's a problem. Now, the total debt in the United States, I'm just going to finish off as far as these numbers go. The total debt at that time in the United States was about 20 trillion or $21 trillion. And again, these are massive numbers, but it gives you an idea as to, like, just their shortfall, just the debt that they possessed, not their liabilities, but just the hard debt that they were carrying at the time, interest-bearing debt. And it was about $20 trillion. Now, roll the clock ahead to now. Right now, the U.S. has a debt of about $31 trillion. So it's about $10 trillion more than it was back in 2008. And what's really critical for us to understand here right now, as we're looking to our neighbors in the South, is that there's a lot of conversations going on right now, not only in the U.S., but globally, about the de-dollarization of the world. And that is the world is in a process of coming off of using the US dollar as its global reserve currency. Now, the global reserve currency has always been in place because it's been the basis of transactions between countries and currencies for decades. And we've all grown very used to the fact that if you're going to have a transaction between two countries, like China, say, and Brazil, that they wouldn't do the transaction in yuan and the Brazilian dollar. They would come together and they would transact in US dollars. But when you talk about the de-dollarization of the world, where all of a sudden countries like China are now doing transactions with other countries like Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates, and you're doing those transactions in yuan and or the current other currencies of the world other than US dollars, there becomes less of a need globally for other nations to hold on to their global reserves of US dollars, because they've all held on to US dollars and been transacting in US dollars for years and years and years. So let's take a look at some of these numbers when you start taking a look at why that's going to be impactful on the road ahead. And Lord, please help me to explain this in a way that is useful to you, because this is going to come right back down to how it's going to impact the lives of our children and future generations in our own nation, and no one else in the mainstream media is talking about. There's lots of people talking about this, but I want to make sure you've got access to these people. So if all of a sudden you've got the confidence in the US dollar as the global reserve currency as not being in place, and you could argue as to why the lack of confidence. One commentary that I read was that the world has lacked the confidence in the US global reserve currency because the US went in and actually seized $9 billion from Afghanistan and $300 billion from Russia, and seized US dollar assets. And that violated the trust of other nations that the US would not do the same thing to them. So they started looking for other ways of doing it. And when you don't have trust in relationships, in currencies, you have a real problem. So the countries began, and China specifically, started going around and actually doing these transactions again with all of these other countries using their currency. And they are, many believe, positioning themselves to establish their currency as the new global reserve currency. And again, you might say, why? Why does that matter to me? Why does that matter to me? Well, because let's take a look at some of these numbers. Because we're seeing countries that are selling off the US dollar assets globally in the form of US treasuries. So if you've got a country that is now no longer requiring or having confidence in the US dollar, and they sell off assets, like, for example, let's take a look at Brazil. Brazil in 2022, the whole year of 2022, sold off about $22 billion worth of US treasuries. And again, I'm going to explain why this is important in a second here, but let's take a look at the numbers. Just in March of this year, so that was in all of 2022, $22 billion. Just in March of this year alone, 1 month, Brazil sold another $21 billion. So 1 month, 21 billion, an entire year previous, 22 billion. You can see there is an acceleration of the selling off of US treasuries. China in 2022 sold off $175 billion of US treasuries. And you could say, well, China's not exactly a friend or an ally of the United States, so selling off US treasuries, that's completely understandable. How about the Bank of Japan? The Bank of Japan, who has been a longstanding ally of Canada, or of the United States, they sold off $189 billion worth of US treasuries in 2022. Russia, and now as a footnote here, as the percentage of their central bank reserve, the total central bank reserve that they have, where they would normally have US dollars, they now have replaced that with about 30% of the Chinese currency. So there is a replacement, a shift that's happening out there. And what happens is that as those dollars are no longer required globally, and the confidence wanes in the US dollar as the global reserve currency, there is going to be a moment in time when all of those dollars that are out there being stockpiled or being held in the hands of all of these foreign nations, all of those dollars are going to come back all at once. to one place here in North America, and that's the United States. It's all going to be pouring back in. And the thing is that they are suggesting is that there's actually not any way of stopping that from happening now, that this is now advanced so far and so fast that it is almost inevitable that you're going to see this flood of US dollars going back into the United States. Now, with the United States continuing what they call their quantitative easing program, which basically just means they are continuing to print money, to continue to pour money, newly printed money into the economy here. You've got all these new dollars being inserted into the economy here. You're seeing all of these dollars being returned globally. You've got massive inflation as a result, because the more currency there is, then the less value each individual dollar has. And most people don't even realize this, but the US dollar, just in the last year, has lost about 15% of its value. Again, nobody's reporting. You're not hearing about this, but that 15% of its value, and that's been ongoing for years now, the US dollar's value is dropping. That's why we see the price of goods go up regularly in Canada, because our currency is also dropping. And that's why that $30 bag of groceries is now $50. You know, your dollar buys less. So you've got all of this money coming back in the United States. And at some point in time, it's going to flip like a switch, and you're going to see a massive escalation of the devaluing of the US dollar as a result. That is going to have an impact on the value of the Canadian dollar as well. And what you're going to see, and again, I am not a financial expert, but I guess I've been doing enough, looking at this long enough, and talking to enough people. What that is going to put in place are things like capital controls. If all of a sudden people feel like the value of their dollar is going to be rapidly devaluing, they're going to try and get their dollars out of the bank or access their dollars to convert it into something else that isn't devaluing. You know, I mean, that's why people see, you know, the real estate market flying over the last little while, is because a lot of the people that are in the know have been getting out of the dollar and getting into harder assets like gold, silver, real estate, Bitcoin, whatever it is that they're investing in. And so, but what happens when all of a sudden the retail market, all of the people start going to the bank and saying, I want my money out because I'm worried that it's devaluing and it's not buying as much, and you get a run on the banks. Then the government implements something called capital controls, where they freeze your money in place. And then they usher in the new digital dollar as the major solution. Now I'm going way too fast over that last section, because just the last line alone of what I just said is an entire conversation in itself, is the new digital central bank digital currencies that are coming in place. But I don't want to get into that right now, because I want you to stay focused on the fact that you are in a situation here in Canada where there is a vulnerability because of things that are beyond your control and beyond my control. But I mean, as an individual, collectively, we can rally governments to deal with this. However, this is quite likely going to happen. Let me put it that way. And there is a great possibility that there's going to be a devaluing of the dollar in the United States, and that we are going to be negatively impacted to the degree I am not going to predict. But you need to prepare. You need to prepare for that possibility. So again, not giving financial advice, not suggesting to you that you take any specific immediate action, but think about what might happen if all of a sudden you can't get money out of your bank, that their capital controls are put in place where you can't access cash and you need to continue to buy groceries, food, and things like that. And there is a massive degeneration of just order and civility in the streets as a result. So I'm putting this in front of you because, as an individual in a local community, you and I have said that the things that you prepare for and deal with at a local level is very important. That you support your local church, that you make sure you've got good relationships with your municipal government leaders, that you are in communication with marketplace leaders locally, that you guys are all talking amongst yourselves within your own communities and making sure you understand what are the plans for if there's a regional power outage or something like this. All of these things need to be dealt with locally, because you're going to be forced into a conversation with everybody locally. And if you're not in relationship with anybody and you haven't had any of these conversations, then it could be a difficult time ahead. So Lord, I just pray that this what I'm sharing with you today does not inspire fear in you, that the spirit of fear does not take a hold of you, but that you know that you as an individual citizen possess authorities, and you possess the skill sets, and that you are aware enough that you can begin to prepare if there's a challenge like this that you need to work together to resolve. And I'm going to be here, obviously, continually. I'm going to encourage you to continue to stay in relationship with me, and we're going to continue to provide you resources as things go on. But our relationship is not as important as the relationship you have locally with your local church and with the people in your community. That's where it's going to be vital that you're plugged in and that people are working together. All right, so I think I'm just going to leave it at that for now. But stay tuned. Stay tuned to the future briefings. Stay tuned. Make sure that you're signed up, that you're getting the post notes. Make sure that you're on our email list. If you are just watching this on a social media platform and you're not signed up at the National Leadership Briefing website, I'm going to give it the address right now. It's nlbcanada.ca. nlbcanada.ca, and you sign up and you register to be on the future briefings here. And I will make sure that because you're on the briefings in the future, that you receive all of the post notes and the resources that we share ongoingly when we see any future challenges pop up, threats to our family, threats to the well-being of the vulnerable that live among us in our community, if we see any threats to your right of belief as an individual or your freedom of religion. And obviously, for parents, we will continue to fight for your right to raise your children the way that you want. So make sure you plug in nlbcanada.ca, and let's stay in relationship on the road ahead. Okay, we're going to come right back here. One quick thing before we wrap up. I got to have to check the time, make sure we've got enough time, but we'll leave it at that for now. And I'll look forward to serving you on that note on the road ahead as well. Back in a flash. Bye for now. Well, here we are on the home stretch of the National Leadership Briefing. 1 hour has gone by so quickly, but I have saved the best for the last. And it is my hope that you are still here on the call after that last segment, because I'm going to introduce to you a gentleman who has such a vast level of experience and expertise in equipping and engaging with local church in a very effective way at the community level. And we have an upcoming Transformer Zoom call coming up that I'm going to be announcing the details of here, that he is going to be the guest speaker of. I'm talking about Dennis Peacock is the next guest on the National Leadership Briefing here today. And we're going to be talking about the Transformer Zoom call event that's scheduled for April 13th. But first, let me just introduce Dennis to you. Dennis has carried a passion for social justice and true spirituality since his college days at USC Berkeley in the 1960s. As a political theory major and former research economist, political economic issues have carried his interest for more than 50 years. He is a compelling international speaker, overseer of international church networks, member of numerous leadership councils, martial arts instructor, and former business owner. This is a man who has been one of my coaches and mentors since 2015, and it is my pleasure to introduce you to him now. Well, thank you so much, Dennis, for joining us today. I'm excited to have this opportunity to chat with you in advance of the April 13th event. We have got this Transformer Zoom call coming up, And I'm kind of keen to get everyone excited about joining us on the call. What can you tell us about what we can expect going into this call coming up on the 13th?
When I became a Christian after a 7-year backsliding experience, and I had put a lot of years into studying political science, macroeconomics, et cetera, et cetera. And when I discovered that the word translated church was ecclesia or ecclesia, it absolutely blew my mind, because as a political theory student, especially under Sheldon Wolin, who is viewed as one of the 20th century's premier political theoretician, the ecclesia was a governing body that exercised authority, jurisdictional authority in the Greek city-states. And I guess I would qualify not as a master, but as an expert for sure on ecclesia and that years of history. And I want to tell you what the church now is miles and miles away from the name ecclesia. And Jesus used the word ecclesia, that he was going to build an ecclesia, not another Jewish religious building. And what we're going to be talking about is what are the major implications of the spiritual revolution that our generation has been called by the Holy Spirit to create. We are at one of the biggest shifts in the history of the church, and therefore the history of God's people. And that's what I want to talk about.
Well, and you're talking about a big shift in the church that's coming up here as well. Obviously, the church, especially the local churches, they're dealing with these massive cultural shifts as well. Can we expect some equipping or some way of understanding better how to deal, knowing ourselves better as the church? Will we be better prepared to deal with the things that are coming at us locally and at various governmental levels as well?
Yeah, the only way we can deal with those things is to begin at the spiritual foundation. And once you see ecclesia and you see what in Greek we would be looking at the elders of the gates, or the elders called to the gates, which is what community action councils are all about. And I want to open that up, which is pretty dynamic and dunamis, if we're going to be accurate. It is explosive, the assignment that we have been given in this generation to see the church go through the changes it's going to have to go through in order to become a body that is a governing body, and that the government of God is actually flowing through the churches in cities. And yes, I think anybody that wants to see what coming attractions means for all of us in a culture that is falling to pieces quicker than we ever imagined that it could do, that's what we're going to be talking about. It's going to change everybody's prayer life if they're able to hear what we're saying.
You know, I'm so excited about this upcoming call, especially now because when we see these potential vulnerabilities in our communities and in our churches, and we have an opportunity to gather some information and become better equipped to respond appropriately, scripturally, biblically, it sure gives us a leg up. So I'm looking forward to seeing you on Thursday, April the 13th. Dennis, I'm going to share in the video that's going to be immediately following our chat here. I'm going to share a video with you all You're going to be able to look on the bottom of the video itself. There's a banner that has an email address where everyone can send an email and register for the actual event. And so make sure that you make a note of that. And Dennis, thank you so much for taking the time to share your wealth of experience and where you see the church needing to grow and go in the days ahead. I appreciate your time today.
Oh, my joy, and we've got an amazing assignment from the Holy Spirit for those of us alive right now.
Amen. I agree. Thanks so much, Dennis. I look forward to seeing you on the 13th.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
We're crying out for the church to be the church in the community.
The ecclesia is a relational model that God has been calling forward.
Being present is about showing up on a regular basis.
So I'm convinced that God will birth a love in one's heart for the place He has put you in. And sometimes that requires a process. Sometimes we don't initially love the place where we are or where God is sending us, but we respond in obedience.
And I believe there must be the restoration of the cry of God in the heart of us as leaders to cry out to God for our cities.
And for those of you who have a heart for your local community, then I would encourage you to participate in what we call Transformer Calls, focused on your engagement and the love that you have for your communities. Well, that is our time for today. Thank you so much for your attention so far. I appreciate very much you being here. Now, before I leave, though, I want to make sure I encourage you to go to the National Leadership Briefing website. Make sure that's nlbcanada.ca. Make sure you go to that NLB Essentials webpage on the website and watch the videos there. We've got some great foundational videos that you can learn from. We've got some fantastic resources to share there. I'm also going to make sure that I include in the post-briefing notes all of the resources on the issues that we spoke of today. So if you want more information about the currency crisis in the United States, how that might be affecting you in a negative way here in Canada, if you want to get the invitation to join us for that next Transformer Zoom call with Dennis Peacock, you will find the invitation material there. Please make sure that you're there on the 13th. Make sure that you join us again on the next National Leadership Briefing. We are so much stronger together. And when you add your voice to ours, we have a much stronger voice together. So thanks so much for your time today. I look forward to seeing you on the road ahead. But until then, God bless you. God bless your family. And may God continue to bless this great nation of Canada. Bye for now.